Shining Tears X-Wind is another romantic game adaptation in the Shining series. And completely on brand, it's a war and magic isekai that fits firmly in the in another world with my new boyfriend light novel friendly subgenre that I've grown so very fond of over these last few years. Meet Akizuki Soma, a strong case for the best friend side character getting bumped up to MC status. And Kiriya Kaito, his prickly justice-seeking classmate and rival. And this is the not-so-subtle romantic subtext of Shining Tears X-Wind. After a brief character introduction, MC Soma and his crush Kureha are whisked away to another world, and the isekai romance setup gets kicked into high gear. But this romantic us-against-the-world action fantasy isekai plot device gets completely derailed by episode 3. And the would-be couple learns that their classmates were brought here as well. Kiriya arrives and has joined the opposing team. He always seems to rub Soma the wrong way. They have this beef-on-sight dynamic with both sexual tension towards each other and perceived romantic rivalry over Kureha, who has an unreturned crush on Kiriya. So Soma claims to be jealous, and that's why he's always aching to throw hands at him. Kureha is actually kidnapped during this scuffle, but instead of rushing to save her with their help, Soma leaves to cool his head, taking hours to wander the wasteland trying to figure out why Kiriya keeps triggering him.
だからキリヤが憎かったんだ。憎くてしょうがなかった。キリヤがいなくなればクレハも俺を好きになるに違いない。そう思って。いや違う。憎くはなかった。じゃあなんだ。あいつを見てると何かイラついた。何に。
Well, I think you know. While Soma does eventually help save her, he decides to duel Kiriya for her heart immediately afterwards.
受け取れ。こいつもな。じゃあな。
And he callously gifts his magic soul sword and Kureha herself to Kiriya, like she's some spoil of war. I'm beginning to think Kureha is not the priority the anime made her out to be. Both Soma and Kiriya are, for lack of a better word, propositioned by other men in the show, each hoping they'll form some weirdly deep contract or bond to help them achieve their goals. Sounds familiar. Saonji, Kiriya and Soma's class president, lucks into power immediately after arriving. He's one of the gay-coded villains in the story, who takes his soul sword from men from the very beginning. Saonji beelines for Kiriya, thinking he's the only one fit to rule by his side.
選ばれたものって？
キリア、共に波動を歩むのだ。新たな秩序をもたらすために。力ずくで従わせるしかない。我が剣を持ってな。
It's all innuendo with this guy, and since he's the despotic yandere, he can't take no for an answer.
Nope.
Meanwhile, during his walkabout, someone gets caught up in some shit and he needs to be rescued by Zero, a powerful winged man that he mistakes for an angel. JK, he's actually a good guy. He's had his eye on Soma for some time, and now Zero needs his help to defeat the bad guy, i.e. save the world. Because this is an RPG adaptation, and if you don't dethrone God at some point, you're doing it wrong. So Soma used to have access to Kureha and her soul blade, but now he's lost both. And it takes Zero to show him that he doesn't need Kureha to buff his stats anymore. The buff was in him all along. Then Zero gives him something much better. Just in case the subtext wasn't obvious enough, Zero slides an enchanted ring on Soma's finger to seal the deal, while he wears an identical ring himself. This is definitely played for romance because Mao, the catgirl waifu he gets shipped with, slides the ring back on his finger the exact same way in episode 10, as if trying to take Zero's place. I don't really need to explain the symbolism behind guys exchanging custom bling with each other. You've seen this before. You know what this is. The anime tries to play it off by implying the ring gives Soma a clearer view of the world, then some weird story about the wearer being a harbinger of chaos, or Zero's substitute, or a soul sword magnet. But the ring doesn't do jack. It doesn't actually impact the plot in any meaningful way. The show keeps making these rings out to be everything but what they are. Luckily, this pretense gets dropped after some unpleasantness in episode 7. Zero swoops in to save Soma and only Soma before taking him back to his place. Believe me when I tell you, this show does not even try to hide the bromance simmering between Zero and Soma. The plot actually grinds to a halt in episode 8 so that they can have some alone time. The sponge bath, the pep talks, the backstories, their level of skinship is actually surprising. Zero's positive BL vibes and unconditional love and support arrive just when they're most needed. Maybe he really is an angel after all. Even after repeatedly going their separate ways, Soma and Kiria's paths still cross. There's an obligatory scuffle after they run into each other again in episode 6, but Soma's personality around him has done a complete 180. Now he's all chummy and smiling even when they're arguing. Kiria needing to shout his opinion directly into Soma's mouth should come as no surprise. When the scene ends, Soma continues his hero's journey, but this time it's Kiria who's left on red to stew in his feelings. Whatever love triangle BS that came between them before is completely dropped, thank God. They're pretty amiable as the series progresses. By episode 12, the second gay Koden villain enacts his evil plan. Soma and the crew have to rush in to stop him and save Saonji, who's been downgraded from second-tier bad guy to damsel in distress. Soma and Kiria have squashed their beef and worked together to save him. But in a catch-22, destroying the machine will save the world but kill Saonji. Because this show can never be romantic enough, they have to choose between saving the world or him. Sounds familiar. But Kiria won't abandon him even for the world. Throughout the series, they made a big friggin' deal about pulling blades out of people. It's kind of the show's whole shtick. The logic in the show being characters draw power from whomever is tied to them romantically. The sword equals the heart, in pretty much every sense of the word. So most of the time, it's men drawing powers from their respective waifus. But when anime really wants you to know it's BL o'clock, the sword extraction will happen between two men. And like Guilty Crown and Galar Knights, the sword pulling isn't just romantic, it's sexual. Shiny Tears is even more obvious about this. In the final episode, Soma is the only one who still doesn't have a heart/love disguised as a sword, and he's just scrambling to get it from anyone he can. Even his earlier belief that he didn't deserve love/a sword is all very on the nose. Turns out Kiria was the holder of the greatest love. I mean Soma's ultimate blade. And said blade can only come from the pure heart of someone who loves you. Swords in hand, they finally defeat the bad guy with the power of their combined gayness. Nailed it. No notes. Good night.